So Domenic, are we ready to start?
Yes, it's recording. We are all set.
Great. So thank you all for joining us. I'm Rob McConnell. I'm the director of the Children's Environmental Health Research Translation Center at USC. And this is the inaugural webinar of a new series that we have called Be Heard. Now, the goal of this series is to empower scholars and communities to be louder, to reach larger audiences, and to get more done in the world outside of academia. We'll teach you how to speak with policymakers and government agencies, how to create an op-ed piece, how to be interviewed and speak with the press, how to do research that's usable by lawyers, which is an important group that we rarely deal with, and finally, how to write a commentary, how to develop a white paper, the sort of thing that can, for junior investigators, can give your career a boost. Now, the most important skill that we'd like for people to learn is how to work with communities. And that's key, because that's where academics learn what's going on the ground. It's where your research can make a difference. And we sometimes think we write a paper and then we're done, that people will take that paper and it will lead to policy. In fact, most of the time, nothing happens with that paper. Or if something happens with that paper, there's some community group, there are advocacy organizations that are between your paper and getting something done. So working with communities it's really important. We could do a lot more than we do. And if we did, we'd learn from each other and we'd get a lot more done than we do now. So I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna briefly introduce our moderator for this event. Sylvia Betancourt has been she's from Los Angeles. She's a native of East LA. She's been doing environmental justice work for over 20 years with various groups across Los Angeles. She currently is the program director for the Long Beach Alliance for Children with Asthma. She's on the board of health in Long Beach. And for us, most important, she's our community scholar in the center for the year, and our link as a center to an important constituency, and the sort of one of the key people who's teaching us how to work with communities. So with that, welcome everyone. Sylvia, thanks for joining, and I'll let you take it away.
Good morning, and thank you, Rob. Thank you. I am very happy to be here today, and so grateful to have been asked to be part of this conversation. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce as well the speakers, our experts who have many years working in the community and also in working with large institutions, in particular with academics. So first, introducing Nsedu Witherspoon as Executive Director of the Children's Environmental Health Network. And Nsedu has served as a key spokesperson for children's vulnerabilities and the need for their protection, conducting presentations and lectures across the country, and is a leader in the field of children's environmental health. And with us as well is Mark Lopez with he's an Eastside Communities organizer and special projects coordinator at East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice. And a little bit about Mark is that Mark was born and raised in a family of community builders. He's helped lead efforts to build well-informed, well-equipped self-advocates for the self-determination of communities in the Eastside, Southeast LA, and Long Beach with East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice. So for over a decade. And he's also the 2017 recipient of the Goldman Environmental Prize. So welcome to you both. Just to give a little bit of if you both would like to say a few words briefly, just as part of your intro. And say.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, Rob, and Mark and team. It's really great to see everyone having this important conversation. I wish it happened more. So again, this leadership is really important. The Children's Environmental Health Network, many may or may not know, we're about 31 years old now as a national nonprofit. We got our start out in the Bay Area, which is not surprising for our mission in the late 80s. And actually the stimulus for our work came from pediatric health professionals who were recognizing, similar to the Flint water crisis and many other crises that happen across the country and around the world, that the children that they normally see were becoming even more and more sick. So the stimulus for even our start, over 3 decades ago, is still the urgency along with many other audiences today, whereas we are looking at our children as the bad phrase, the canary, in the coal mine. And if you look at the negative health outcomes that children still face, chronic illnesses and beyond, it continues to show us that we must show up so much differently for them. We have to have a new, I'd say, realm of urgency for the kind of paradigm system level shifting that needs to happen for all of our benefit, because you create a natural buffer for all when you protect children, but especially their benefits. So I'm very much looking forward to our conversation, and academic partnerships are vital and have been vital to the work that we do, because it's that foundational science over the years that has allowed us to advocate on behalf of children, especially our most vulnerable of children, and to ensure that the policies, the public health standard setting that does take place, that is slowly happening, especially at our state level, city level, is informed primarily and almost exclusively by the lived experiences of community members themselves, who are indeed in the fights every single day. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all.
Hey, everybody. Been looking forward to this conversation for a minute now. Yeah, so at East Yard, I think, and Sylvia is very familiar with this because it's part of the core work of La Vaca too, right, is working directly with community members and helping community members understand their own experiences and build their own narratives, right? Being able to tell their own stories from their perspective, their experiences in dealing with these environmental health issues, and developing what we call community experts, right? And in this way, folks are able to speak out from the personal narrative that connects to a larger community experience, right? And this is very useful when it comes to the advocacy that we do. Along with that, East Yard has focused some energy on helping build community experts into technical experts as well, right? So that folks can generate data, utilize data along with the personal narrative and the collective experience at the community level to be able to advocate, right? So this has been something that we've done intentionally as an organization. And part of it is because we've learned through our collaborations with academic partners what the power is when you have that level of credibility to be able to advocate, right? And I think a lot of times there's limitations placed on our academic partners, right? They can't necessarily advocate. Sometimes even just telling the truth, they get accused for advocating, right? When they're just telling the truth about what's going on, right? But community members don't have those same limitations, right? And so I think it's in being able to work in partnership that we're able to move in ways that we otherwise wouldn't, And so looking forward to exploring that some more here in today's conversation.
Thank you both for those introductions. It helps to set the stage for your experiences, where you're coming from, and what are ways that that same experience can help to inform others here in the meeting, in particular for researchers. So starting with our first question, just going right into it, is what have been your experiences with research partners that you've had in the past?
Sure, I can jump in. So we still have research academic leaders on our board. In this day and age, we also have practitioners. We also have other nonprofit leaders, community leaders, business leaders that we're working on. So even our advisement of who we are as an organization is intentionally framed so that we don't miss out on key audiences, key partners, and we see academic partnerships as a critical part of that. We are proud of the fact that we do lean in on available peer-reviewed science, and I'm a public health trained person. I also understand science at times doesn't move as fast as we would like. So there is also a logic to a lot of our work, right? Like a lot of it you can see with your own eyes. So the science is there. It's very important for us to support it, to stimulate it, to help identify and be a translator, not for the public, right? But for the science, and with our science practitioners and partners the best we can, for the motivation of elevated, much better standards that protect all of us, policies that protect all of us. And at the same time, when that science is taking its time, because it has to be so careful, we don't stop there, right? We do also lean in on the precautionary principle, acting with caution and then waiting for any other type of action to then be further validated, right? That is not the way we do things. So our experience with academic leaders has been in partnership. For example, we are coordinating the Children's Environmental Health Research Translation Centers for NIH. We're very excited and honored to have this role. We are helping to coordinate the existing 6 centers. Previously, in a different iteration of NIH's support of pediatric environmental health research, there were the Children's Centers of Excellence. We also work closely with those directors and those programs over the years. It's a critical part of our network and our infrastructure, as in addition to others. So we are at times a convener. We've had pediatric research convenings where all of those leaders and beyond have come, networked, leaned on each other, shared challenges, best practices, and elevated all of our knowledge in the thinking of the work that we're doing. And then at times we are, of course, the stewards of the information, and also collecting, and we're utilizing the research among our staff, among our partners, to do better, right? To take what's existing, what's available to us, and make sure it does not just get stagnant in a peer-reviewed article, but that it's actually moving into action. So those partnerships are critical to us. And again, for our advisement and for our work hand in hand with community and other national groups, as well as even international groups at this point.
Yeah, I mean, for me, our existing partnerships are why I'm on this panel right now. Andrea Rico gave me a call and said, hey, you should get back to Rob and do this panel. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but yes, I am down. And that just speaks to the relationship of trust that has been built over time, right? I think we're constantly getting solicited for a variety of things, including academic projects. And at a certain point, I'm just like, if we don't have an existing relationship, I'm not even going to respond, because we got too much going on. And so yeah, I think, some of the relationship that previous leadership of East Yard had with Andrea Rico and other folks at USC was really foundational in the formation of East Yard, in building curriculum, in doing P-track air sampling to build community leadership. That was really foundational, not just for East Yard, but other organizations, and that type of partnership built a regional network that then became the model for building a national network of community and academic partnership. And so I think, I don't know that there's any aspect of our organization or movement that that hasn't been positively impacted by our academic partnerships. And just to give a little more background, along with Andrea building strong relationships with some of the founders of East Yard, my mother and grandmother know Andrea since the 90s when it comes to issues on lead. And so, meeting Andrea again as an adult, when I joined East Yard, it was like, oh wow, this is this is all like connecting and making sense, right? And then being able to meet Joe Johnston, who when Andrea retired, stepped into the role, helped facilitate that continued relationship. And I think for me, in a current research project that we're doing with Joe Johnston and others, I think her participating in the same spaces that we're in with public agencies consistently just helps continue that strong relationship that that facilitates the opportunity for future research projects, right? Without us continuing to have these relationships, these opportunities may come along, and we have to work harder to make those connections. We have to work harder to build trust, or because a lot of times these grant cycles are on such short on-ramps, like how could you possibly build the level of trust needed for these types of community-based research projects if that doesn't already exist, right? And so I'm just very grateful of the folks who we collaborate with, who work with us in very like responsible, transparent and accountable ways, because it means we don't have a bunch of horror stories of working with academics, right? At least I don't. And so yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you both for that. As you were speaking, one of the things that I was seeing that was in common from both your responses is that idea of trust. And you use the word advisement and say, but you need advisement for a reason. And so what I wanted to sort of drill down on the specifics of why trust, why advisement. Can you be a little more specific about what those experiences have been that have required that level of trust and building relationships?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been burned. I'll just start close to home, where you think you're on the same page. You think that you have done a bit of your reconnaissance, and you've, especially to Mark's point, if it's a brand new partner, colleague, researcher that's reaching out, because we also get those, right? And you're trying to get a sense of what they're about, what are their motivations. Clearly, we're usually a huge asset to them. We bring a lot to the table, including our networks and our relationships. And we take that very seriously, especially our relationships with community and those organizations working directly with community. The last thing we want to do, one of the things we do have after 31 years of this is our reputation and our relationships. The last thing we're trying to do is burn those, because then we don't have much to go on. So it's extremely important to our mission, our work. Our board expects us, to take every partnership extremely seriously and to be strategic and to make sure that we understand what we get out of this and what our mission and what we're trying to do gets out of any relationship. Expanding further, I mean, let's go way back for a minute. I was talking to the ECHO annual meeting just last week. These are cohorts in the field of children's environmental health working together. It was fantastic to see them all in one room again. They've been virtual for many years. And I said something similar, which is, we don't bring up the history to dwell in it, but it is very important to understand by which the infrastructure by which our healthcare system, our education system, our criminal justice system, and certainly our research paradigm in this country is built. There are racial inequities. There are just blatant racial tactics that were used to start a lot of our research entities, right? So we need to work really hard, in my opinion, to ensure that we are collectively not perpetuating hierarchical type of structures. And that includes, we look at who's on the teams, we look at the diversity of the teams, we look at who they're working with and who their partnerships are, because all of that also is part of the package. There's a lot of great things said when people are wanting to work and partner with you, but we also look back at their history and we look back at who they are and who they maybe not be. So it's the things that they don't say that are just as critical as what they do. So again, to Mark's point, you know, if we're taking a call, if we're taking a serious conversation a little further about what this means, and more importantly, what our collective partnership should mean for the population we are both trying to serve, we should all be clear and comfortable and be able to rest easy with the information we've been able to find. And in the power of the internet, it's amazing what you can find very quickly. The good stuff and the not so good stuff. So, you know, let's just remind ourselves that we are constantly, I think, up against this constant battle of so many mishaps in public health and partnerships that definitely went south. And when you look at it, they were never really set up with the true genuine threads of trust. There was always an inequitable balance of that partnership. And I review grants periodically for our federal agencies. And you see, again, people and applicants at times, even in this day and age, are very expressive. They're using terminology. They're saying all the right things. And then you go to areas of the application like the budget, and the community partner that they've now glowed about for 8 pages is given not even like 10% of the budget for their contributions and their time and their lived experiences. So it's not just about monetizing this, but that is a big part of it. Our community members must have equitable, transferable leadership ability to how research is conducted, especially when that research is based on their experiences, their data, and their vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I think returning that to that idea of trust, that's only built over time, right? And that's only built by knowing and understanding each other. And so I think that already cuts out a lot of the space that might exist for exploiting, or in other ways, you know, generating harm through research, because that is something that happens, right? I mean, human subjects exist for a reason, right? And so I think when you have relationships with folks and folks understand what you're doing, they're not coming out of nowhere with projects that kind of serve their interests that aren't already aligned with yours, right? And so I think for us as an organization with our academic partnerships, we're not being pulled into other directions that aren't already part of our mission, part of our vision, right? Part of our existing campaign work. It's more, I don't know. It's like it feels like, yeah, this is obviously, this makes sense. Like, of course we would do this. This makes total sense. This is exactly what we need. In some cases, we've been asking for these things for years. And then the possibilities come up. I think that's the case for the current, you know, Get the Lead Out research project, where we've been raising issues for years to the state about homes that have been cleaned up. Have they been recontaminated? Are you going far enough in actually adequately profiling the contamination zone, right? And the state's unwillingness to do confirmation sampling after they decontaminate homes, the state's unwillingness to continue to expand the sample zone to understand how far the contamination goes, leaves a lot of questions. And so you know, Jill Johnson being in the EYCEJ technical advisory group meetings, hearing these questions, for years, right, basically posed them back to us. Hey, do y'all want to do a research project so we can get data that can tell us something about those things, right? And part of it is we can purchase an XRF machine that we can test as much soil as we want, right? And I was like, damn, we've been wanting an XRF machine for like 10 years, you know, and we can afford it. That's just not something that's possible. The types of grants that alone as a community organization that we get do not fund that. And so I think, you know, for me, that trust is understanding that a research project isn't just an academic endeavor, but for us, it is advancing like our understanding and possibility to confront community issues, right? And those two things together, I think, are what the trust is about. Because I trust that folks that we have relationships wouldn't bring us projects that don't do those things. I think they know us well enough that we would not be interested in that, right? Yeah.
And thank you for that, Mark. I was really glad to hear you start to go into a specific example and start to kind of name things and just how incredibly valuable it is. I really appreciate how you just broke it down to it's not just an academic endeavor, but this has so much more meaningful, right, and important impact, right, for our communities. I'm also very impressed that you knew what an XRF machine was, right, like 10 years before, and that you know that's that savvy that required to have to know these things ourselves. Never did we think that we would have to learn what that kind of machine was, but because of the circumstances, right, of that environment. And so that being said, I wanted to kind of dive into some more examples. So if there are researchers who are listening and really wanting to know, well, what does that, give me some more information about what that looks like. Can you speak to some specific examples from that experience, Mark, in how there was that negotiation of what were the things you needed on the ground and what did they need and what did you have to work with based on the larger institution that also has its own parameters for working, right? So you're working within all of these pieces.
Yeah, I mean, I think what
I was just going to interrupt for a moment. I forgot to, we have close to 40 participants. And if people have questions that they'd like to pose to the panel, you can put it in the Q&A. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. The questions. Oh no. Are y'all still there? Yeah, sorry. Something like popped up on my screen. I thought I fell off. Yeah, questions from the audience makes this conversation a lot more interesting and specific to what y'all want to know, right? But yeah, so I think you know, we were planning out this research project in the pandemic. A research project that requires us to go door to door, right? And so I think we didn't when that first like winter surge happened, we hadn't anticipated that. And so it had an impact on our ability to be out on the doors in the ways that we wanted to. And so timeline wise, that represented some delays for us. Some of the initial homes that we sampled came out so much higher than we thought they would. And so it required us going back to these homes to do site visits, to have conversations with the residents about how to reduce, you know, the pathways of exposure. Those are things that we didn't anticipate having to do, but we couldn't just be like, hey, you know, your yard is toxic. We'll invite you to this community meeting in 3 months, right? That was, hey, your results are coming in the mail. We're letting you know they're really high. So we'll come back out to your home and talk to you about where do you have exposed soil? Where do your kids play? Where do you plant food? All these types of things, right? And so again, that slowed down our ability to kind of hit the benchmarks on how many homes were being sampled. And I think, yeah, our research partners understood that. And I think in some ways we're probably more open to that than even we are ourselves. Sometimes I think in the nonprofit world, right, there's so much emphasis on like deliverables, right? And at least for ECR, luckily we have a lot of general operating funds, and so that pressure on deliverables isn't necessarily the same. But I think like gaining the perspective of approaching this work from a research standpoint is we're learning something. If we're not hitting those benchmarks, there are reasons. And that becomes part of our analysis for our project, right? And so that ability to like roll with the punches in ways that isn't just like scrambling, right? Like I was like, oh, okay, a research project feels a little different, right? And definitely credit to our academic partners for not putting that pressure on us. Like, hey, what's up, man? Y'all need to like, we need a higher turnout on some of this stuff. And then actually came through with some resources. Both of our academic partners on the project at USC and Occidental College dedicated some resources to increasing the team size. And the folks they brought on were actually members of our organization who were either active students or former students at their institutions. And so that I was like, whoa, like this is community folks doing this community work through the academic institutions because they're also affiliated with these academic institutions. And that in itself was kind of a new growth space for us that to be honest is one of the kind of highlights that when I look back at this project. And then the numbers pick up and we've gotten closer to our goal now, and I think almost hit it, if not surpassed it. I haven't looked at the numbers in like 2 weeks. And so we get there. And so I think the kind of trust that we've built, again, going back to trust, allows us to be flexible with our work, with our research, because we understand each other and understand the goals of the work. And so it's really been a great experience, and has, to be honest, like set the bar for all future research to come. Like if these other folks ain't coming this correct, like, we got to have conversations about it.
I love that, Mark. Elevating. We're all elevating our game here, because if we're not, what are we doing this for? And I'll just add, I mean, there are many examples we can give in the field of pediatric environmental health research. And thankfully, I'm seeing more and more of these very intentional partnerships with community, not because of design, but because the researchers understand it's a huge value add to see the science moving into actually helping community in a very varied levels of indicators. So just for example, the Columbia Center for Children's Environmental Health, Dr. Ricky Pereira used to lead some of this work. And now they do, they still have continued in a community outreach and translation core. And for years, I think it's even over like a decade now, they've partnered with West Harlem Environmental Action in New York City, which is also a longstanding environmental justice national organization. In fact, Peggy Shepard was at the signing of the new executive order on environmental justice at the White House just earlier in last week. This ebb and flow of information and the trust from day one, it does not happen overnight. And I would like to impart too that we need patience in this entire process, just like you need patience to deal with your family members or other members of your community. As you need to make your way towards certain goals, it doesn't This happens as well with academic community partnerships and other partnerships. We all, in theory, hopefully have identified we're going in the right direction. That's part of it. But also we need to identify, are we the players? Are we the partners that truly believe we're part of this journey? So once you get past some of that we talked about earlier, you still have to feed this relationship, right? It's very serious. These ebbs and flows, being patient. I love the point about flexibility. A lot of times in science, we have our protocols and we have our timelines and all of that. We have to allow ourselves to be flexible. And I know that that goes against the system and the institutions that I talked about earlier, but to be the stewards of this truly genuine type of partnership that will benefit, because the Columbia Center and WEACT, among other partners in that center, have gone so far as to develop research together that have benefited now pregnant women, women of childbearing age, and children in New York City, because now housing laws, public health housing laws are elevated because of the research that came out of that center, following and tracking pesticide exposures, for example, in pregnant women and where they were living. So for now ever, moving forward, people that move into certain public housing in such a condensed, highly populated area like New York City have the benefits of the outcomes from this center. That didn't happen overnight. That's meticulous work. And that's also work of other advocate groups that took the science in partnership and beyond and moved it even further than the lab. In addition, there's been monumental science that's come out on the connection between the proximity of where a child spends a lot of time, say their house, their childcare, their school, and whether they're near a high thoroughfare, a lot of high producing air pollutant volume traffic activity, which in New York City happens a lot, right? And been able to show for the first time that children can actually have onset of asthma without ever having asthma, just because of their proximity throughout day after day to high air traffic, air pollutants. That was huge for our field, right? To be able to prove that and show that that's true. And for other community designers to think really seriously when you're thinking about the patterns of transportation and roadways. We have enough to do on our transportation efforts anyway, but while that is being worked on, people need help right now. And it's not okay to just send a child into a situation where they're gonna have, respiratory distress on a regular day just because of where they live or where they go to school or where they're in childcare. That work, for example, came out of that center. And it's that collaboration between the partners and the on the ground stewards, the ones that hold the respect and rapport of community, that those community members even engaged in that center and that research for all of us to then benefit and then elevate that work moving forward.
I'm so glad that you shared those examples. I'm thinking in terms of also with how do we augment it? But before I go there, I did say that there was a question in the chat. So someone from the audience is asking, what types of resources do you need?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. I think, money is the obvious one, right? Like, this is work. This is real work that in research partnership we're putting in. So that's obvious. But I think even preceding that, just a conversation that I was having with some other potential academic partners from UC San Diego. I think like time, process as a resource, because we started having conversations. It was myself, somebody from another organization, and 3 academics from UC San Diego, and they were just like, y'all are cool, y'all do cool work, we're cool, we do cool work, let's talk about the different work that we're doing, and maybe we'll find something that like makes sense for us to do together. And so we just talked for an hour. Just no like specific agenda, no proposed project already on the table, just a real like deep, what are our interests, what excites us, what are things that are emerging, what are things that we don't have any resources for, what are things that we've been working on for 10 years but could find other connections. Yeah, and so I think that approach, and these are folks that we don't necessarily already have relationships with, right? But somebody reached out earlier and invited me to lunch, and I was like, cool, you want to buy me some lunch? That's a way to get an hour of my time, you know? And so, oh, you actually live here in the neighborhood? Boom, extra point, you know? Oh, okay, cool. You're like, you spend a lot of time and energy contributing to like indigenous sovereignty through your research. Cool, another point, right? Oh, you're talking to me about community-based research. Cool, another point, right? Like all these things are how I'm sizing you up. You know, I'm getting to know you, and our interest and political alignment on some of these things is why I'm going to be down to continue to have this conversation. And that leads into this like kind of agenda-less conversation, which was exciting for me because I'm just like, I don't know what's going to come from it, but that invites my creativity, right? And I appreciate that. So let's see what we come up with, right? And we're spending that time, and now next month or so we're going to get together in person in San Diego and spend hours together generating ideas on what we could potentially do together, right? And I understand on their end they're going to publish something, right? Like in a college setting, in a university setting, this is working towards our tenure, right? Like I understand that. My wife is an academic, and so she talks about that all the time around like there is an imbalance here, right? Like this is my career. These are things that contribute specifically to my career, and there's tangible ways that this contributes to community. But as far as like individually what I'm getting out of it compared to the individuals who are participating in this research, it isn't exactly the same, right? There is an imbalance there. And so I understand that, but when folks talk about that openly and that's on the table for understanding how we're approaching this, how labor gets distributed, all these types of things, and then that makes sense, right? And so I think process as a resource is probably, you know, if not the most important, one of the most important things that's needed.
I would support everything Mark said. And then the only addition I would say too is that we in the nonprofit world, again, really heavily have to rely on those that advise us. We can't do everything in all things, and nor should we. So constantly in a field like children's environmental health that's connected to just about every environmental exposure you can think of, we still have to be strategic. Even if we had 100 more staff, we'd still have to be strategic. So we really have to rely on our sounding boards and those that we bring in to be like a brain trust. And it is just not supported in academia for many folks to come and serve on boards, to serve on advisory capacity. Again, if it's, as Mark said, not part of that trajectory of leading to a direct publication and or part of that 10-year course. And we've had many of our senior level science advisors tell us this over the years, that it wasn't until they got to a certain level in their career when they had a little bit more leeway to do those kind of things. I think that's a huge misstep, right? Part of this is also working on the development of those researchers coming behind us. It's not just the techniques and the relationship building that we're talking about that's so vital, but if we're missing the boat and not even giving them opportunities to weigh in and learn and engage at various levels of their career, and we're not waiting till they become the most senior status, we're missing the boat. And who loses there but communities who are in harm's way right now.
Excellent points. Thank you. Thank you very much. I had a question about, I mentioned about augmenting and how to sort of publicize the work, but I'm going to go to one of the questions that is actually multiple questions from the chat. So, because I want to hear from the audience. So, Katrina Rivers asks, what protective factors are in place for the communities who are directly impacted by identified environmental justice issues? Many are not financially able to have these issues addressed and might be renters who fear retaliation from landlords or others for self-advocating. How do you link the community with services after issues are discovered? And how do you assist them to navigate highly politicized issues that are known to yet ignored by local, state, and federal authorities? I'll start with Nsedu.
Yeah, this is a great question. We serve as a connector, I'd say 95% of the time, right? We don't have all the answers. We do a lot of direct work ourselves, but it's who we connect folks to. So whether they're calling us, emailing us, any other modes of communication, the first thing we ask is, where are you in the world, actually? Usually in the US, but there are folks that call outside or email, and do you know about? So there's already some overlapping resources we want people to make sure that they're aware of, no matter where they are in the country. And then we get to why they're calling. There might be a specific question. This question was raised around housing. So we have some trusted partners. The same process that we've talked about with academic partnerships plays out in our other partnerships, whether it's other public health oriented groups or justice groups or what have you. So we have like a Rolodex of trusted partners who we know we can introduce someone to, that we know that they're much more defined in that arena. So the National Center for Healthy Housing, for example, is a long trusted partner. We would connect folks with direct partners who are swimming in the health justice arena. They know the contacts, they know some direct service providers, and they are national, so it's across the country. And same thing when it comes to water issues or school issues or what have you. The pediatric environmental health specialty units in this field are a phenomenal resource that most folks don't know about. And it's free to connect with them, and they will have a public health trained person answer the call or answer the email and listen all the way through to referral of clinical care, God forbid if needed. So there's a whole range of resources and connections. So we can't do it all by ourselves. Mark can't do it all by himself. It's the partnerships that we've built around us so that we can all have a much stronger extension. We could not have said this 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. It's been an onboarding of methodical, intentional, and allowing ourselves to grow, because there's been new organizations that have popped up, thankfully, around climate justice and climate change and many other issues. So it's not like we know everybody, but we do know a good amount to get people started. And what we also try to do is not just hand people off. We want to stay connected to them. We want to make sure that they've gotten what they really feel that they needed. There have been times when we've gotten calls back and they feel frustrated, they don't feel heard. So whether it's health department connections or government agency connections or other nonprofit community grassroots efforts, we try to listen to what the needs are, or they may not even know what the exposure pathway is, but we try to listen to what the concerns are and try our best to refer, if you will, and we hand off with a very personalized introduction of who this group is, who this person is, and how we believe that they can help them get to the next stage of their journey here, so that they're feeling heard, and that more importantly, they get some help needed wherever that may be.
Yeah, all of that for sure. I think with that, also being able to be humble enough to say, I don't know, right? Like if you really don't know, I think that's important. It's hard for all of us to admit that sometimes, right? I think for community-based research or research with community partnership, that at least for us, that is the intent. We're doing research for advocacy. We're not just doing research for research sakes. We're going to use that. We're going to activate that. We want information so we can use the information to resolve a specific issue, right? And so anything that comes from that, we're in a position, we have that community organizing infrastructure to move. And so I'm not sure if Katrina, if there's like a specific issue or something, definitely feel free to reach out and, can support with processing some of that. But at least for the Get the Lead Out project, some of these issues came up before we did a research project, right? So when it comes to like landlord retaliation, initially the landowners had to sign off on getting homes sampled by the state, right? And we understanding that our communities are majority renters, we're like, that's not going to work. There's tons of absent landlords and even tenants approaching landlords for this conversation already puts them in harm's way. And so we're not actually doing the state isn't doing any soil removal. You can sample in the field, so it shouldn't require the landowner to sign. The renters should be able to provide consent to do the sampling. For the actual removal of soil during the cleanup process, that for sure the landlord needs to sign off on that. But at that point, if we already know there's contamination, it puts them in a different position, because now there's an issue on their property and they can either have it cleaned up for free or it's going to be a problem, right? And that positions it differently. And so I think because where, at least for this research project, is coming out of our advocacy, it's already there. We're in conversations with the County Department of Public Health to bring resources to community. We're in conversations with the California Department of Toxic Substance Control to reshape what the cleanup process looks like, because it's been ineffective, right? So we're already in that position. We've already been advocating, and not just us, but our academic partners have already been part of that process prior to the research as well. Yeah.
That's very important how, I think you just summed it up with research for advocacy. And I think that many of the people who are here are wanting to know that as well. Like, how can the research be meaningful and have meaningful impact in the public sector? Now, thinking about how do you augment it? How have you worked? And I'm just looking at time. We have 6 minutes before 11, and we could keep talking. I would love to keep listening to you and your experiences and your insights. If you could briefly share what have been your experiences working with media, how do you augment and really get out there, nationally, maybe even internationally, the research that's extremely important to other communities as well?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's gotten to the point here where it's bilateral. Many times earlier in our history, we were the ones kind of pitching constantly. Over time, again, the relationship building, once again, the theme, you get to know, you have a filter, right? There are some journalists out there who are very slanted on what they want to do, and they have a whole professional trajectory, and you can kind of get right away whether they're really embodying this work or whether it's just something to do. We gravitate towards those who are passionate about this work and who are intrigued and are ready to listen and have a bilateral partnership. So now it's at the point where we get our inboxes flooded with those colleagues out there who we know are interested in covering these issues, are interested on being on the cutting edge, are not afraid to shy away from maybe what they've been pressured to not write about or talk about or blog about. Those are the ones we tend to gravitate to, and we build a rapport. They trust what comes from us. We trust what comes from them. If I do an interview, I know they're not going to distort my messages. They're going to say what I've said, and more importantly, not distort the messages from community partners or other partners. So I think it's a very important relationship that researchers should work on. It may not be comfortable. Many of us out here are willing to help. There are advocacy trainings that we do and how to work with and talk with and approach policy leaders. And many of us also do the same when it comes to communication leaders out there. There's a different way that you might want to do that and approach that. And then what are the ways that you can get your science out that doesn't rely on waiting until someone finds it haphazardly, but to be proactive about that and to be the best steward of your content, of the research that you have worked and your team and your community team have worked on, and what that means. That's very important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, once you build that credibility with journalists and you trust them, that's important, because yeah, you will get burned by media too, right? And those are lessons that you learn along the way. I think our research ended up on the cover of the LA Times, and that was huge for us because it shifted the conversation we were having with the state. It's just like, how are they not going to talk to us about this LA Times cover story, right? And they actually, to be honest, the state particular staff from the Department of Toxic Substance Control were trying to poke holes in our research. They were hoping that it was inadequate. They were hoping they would find faults with it. Of course, you know, our academic partner, Jill Johnston, because this is what she does, was like, this is what I do. Like, what you talking about? Here's every point you're bringing up. Yes, boom, hear this, hear that, hear this. And so was able to defend our research, right? In ways that if this was purely like an East Yard research project, we wouldn't be able to be honest, right? And so that like defense of our collaborative research was incredible. I was watching it like, fuck, this shit is going down right now, and like standing tall, like love that, right? And so that shifted the conversation, because if the state couldn't find holes in our research, then what is the problem here? So then this is a real problem. Okay, so then how do we start to address this, right? So that was critical. And so the LA Times piece played a huge role in that. But there was a problem with the LA Times piece, to be honest. Like, I had talked to the journalist, and they had identified only USC as the research entity. And I was like, no, it's a partnership between USC, Occidental College, and Eastside Communities for Environmental Justice. What ended up getting published was USC and Occidental College. And we just got left out of that, right? I got a quote deeper in the article, and there was a picture or whatever, but I was just like, dude, we talked about this. Like, I saw you type the words. You know, if you needed to cut some words because of the word count, I know Eastside Communities for Environmental Justice is a long name, but come on, man, like that's not cool, right? And for folks after that started to frame how they were talking about the research, right? Leaving Eastside out of it. But credit to our academic partners, they're always putting us up front for what our research collaborative is. We had already had meetings to talk about our research with elected officials at multiple levels of government. So they already knew, right? The LA Times article didn't negatively affect that. And even in LA Times talking to us, I had pitched a journalist like months before about our work. And, you know, I will admit I pitched them on like 12 other things too. But they didn't run with it, right? And then later, a different journalist from the Times hit up Jill Johnston, and Jill Johnston was like, "Well, you need to talk to Eastside, right? Like that it isn't just the PhD, right? Like we're working on this together." And so, you know, I have a deep appreciation for Jill and her entire team. In the way they approach the work. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be shared beyond this panel, because I know we're wrapping up here.
Thank you so very much. There's a lot to be said for what you've shared today, and I know that so much more could be shared. Seeing the time, I also just want to add, I'm not even going to go into trying to summarize. I think that all of it is really, really clear and in the messages that you were both sharing. But I do want to add, someone in the chat is saying bravo to Eastside, and they know firsthand how DTSC had really tried to discredit your work, but your pressure is obviously really, really valuable. So, and so appreciate you and the work that you do with children. Definitely a contact that I want to keep for myself. So I'm passing this back to Rob. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Thanks to the panelists. And as I mentioned, that I'm really pleased with this first webinar that we're doing. There'll be a number of other topics, and you know, we have a vibrant program. Jill has a vibrant program, I probably should say, and you know, we'll have, you know, as we develop new topics, you know, we'll be thinking about ways that people could get involved. You know, our hope is that that young scholars will get excited about some things, and then they'll want to go do some work. You know, they'll want to go to community meetings, meet people, learn some new things, and then spend some time doing something that would be useful to our counterparts. So thank you all, and more soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.